Hi, my name is Sara Berman, and I thought that I would really like to share a little bit about my parents' story. I mean, in the last few years, there's been a lot of critical information about the beginning of the development of the land of Israel, and so I thought it really would be important to share what it was like, or the stories I grew up with my parents. My mom was born in a little town called Zamość near Warsaw, Poland, at the age of 14. It was a very Zionist family. At the age of 14, decided she really wanted to go to Palestine then. And so she studied for a year in Poland. There were Zionist organizations that set up like a pretend kibbutz style environment, and so she did that for a year, and at the age of 15 left her home, her family, and traveled to Palestine. So she was there in 1931, part of the fifth Aliyah, and continued to work tirelessly. I mean, she probably wouldn't identify herself now as a socialist, but she lived in an environment where one did for one another. I mean, where there was never the thought about me and what I have and anything material. If your neighbor didn't have flour, you'd give them the flour. If you needed some sugar, you'd go over there and do that. My father left. She also had two sisters already, or one sister already in Israel, the other one about to come. So she did have somebody very important. Her plan was to live in a kibbutz. Her sister, who was in Haifa, decided that no, you really need to be with me. So she did stay in Haifa and keep going back and forth to different kibbutzim to just be there, because that's who she was. My father was from White Russia, Belarus, Stalin actually, and a strong Zionist, left for, as his family was, left for Israel in 1932, went to Tel Aviv, graduated gymnasium, strong Orthodox Jewish family, but Israel was a very secular country, and so they lived probably more secular lives with that strong Jewish education behind them. His intention was to be in Tel Aviv, which is this big metropolitan city. There was a fire in Tel Aviv, all of his papers got destroyed, and he wound up going to a very important kibbutz called Ein Harod. My parents met at Ein Harod. The story was that she went there to pick grapes, and she was probably a little heftier, and he kind of helped her climb up the hill, and that was it. It was love at first sight, and then they lived in Haifa. I was born in Haifa at the end of 1944, August of 1944. At that point, my mother's entire family, her father had passed away in Europe from cancer, but her mother, youngest brother, two sisters were all in Haifa. And so I was surrounded with family, with cousins. My parents were constantly out doing things. The stories I would hear about was that the British had imposed a restriction on people coming into Haifa, but there was illegal immigration into Haifa, and they were always on the beaches of Haifa helping with that immigration. They were very active in what needed to be done. My mother, after the Holocaust in the 40s, would always go to the camps and because the British, once they even got to Palestine still, the British had put them into detention camps, and she would always go into the detention camp and say, this one's a cousin, this one's this one that. So as small of an apartment as we had, there were always particularly teenagers there. She was a nurse, once had gone in the park in Haifa with a walk, found a 14-year-old smoking, didn't have the inhibition that we do now to speak to strangers, went up to him and said, you're 14, what are you doing smoking? And he said, my parents all were killed in the Holocaust, what do I care? I have nobody. And she says, you do now. He became sort of an adopted brother, and he lived with us. At the end of 45, my father discovered that all of his family, who couldn't get out, they were stuck in the middle. White Russia didn't want to let them out. By the time they got their visas, the British had imposed restrictions of people coming in, and they couldn't come into Israel because of those restrictions, and they were all killed by the Nazis. And except for one of member, his aunt, who lived in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And after the war, they reconnected, and it became driven for him to come to the States. So, but their lives in Israel, you know, as much as there's been very critical pieces about the leadership and the people that were there, they were incredibly idealistic, and they did what they needed to do to develop that country. And so I just wanted to share that story and give their lives a real purpose. So their names were Esther and Yona Mayer Cantor. Thank you.